and welcome back to the How to Be Good podcast, the show where we talk to people and businesses that are looking to combat climate change and live a more sustainable life. So this show is part 2 of our interview with Louie Psihoyos, the director of The Cove, Racing Extinction, Game Changers, and many, many more things. As we heard in the first part of the interview, he seems to be so busy doing so much stuff at the moment.
Just stay with us as we talk about the Game Changers, Racing Extinction, and discovering the amazing adventures that they've had to go through filming these documentaries, but also the frightening things that they've had to go through.
Absolutely.
But also the new projects that he's working on, the backup and support that they need to continue in this journey in changing the world.
Absolutely. So let's get to it. Let's listen to the show. So, Racing Extinction. We've talked a lot about that, and I think Anka was going to be talking a lot about how that changed us as a movie as well.
Yes, that was the documentary that changed our life around. We turned vegan because of it. I remember watching it, and at the beginning, about the last song of the old male looking for a female that never came. That completely broke my heart. And actually, I think just the other day, I've heard about the last Walmaco in Rio de Janeiro, visiting the zoo, looking for a mate, really feeling really lonely. So we can definitely see that this is the sixth mass extinction that you're trying to depict in the documentary, and it's presented really well. For those that haven't seen it, can you talk a little bit about Racing Extinction?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we remember things by stories, right? And that's how we change. I mean, people think that, oh, well, if you get people to have the information, that'll change them. It's about knowledge, and it's not quite true. I think a lot of the science shows now that you need to change people's heart first, and that's the key to changing the way they think. And then we rationalize it as humans. We will use once our hearts are on board, then we use our brain to find a strategy to justify the emotions. So we know that, and we know. To me, it's an emotional thing to lose the coral reefs, to lose these species that have gone through the same gauntlet of history as us. Yeah. It's unconscionable that one species can do that. We're 1 out of 10 to 30 million species on the planet. We don't even know how many species there are. We've only identified, I think, a couple million now. But we're losing species right now faster than scientists can accurately record that they're here on the planet with us. Mm-hmm. And I did 4 stories for National Geographic on extinction, or the Mesozoic, the midlife of the planet, the age of dinosaurs. And Michael Novacek, I was interviewing him for this book I was doing on dinosaurs, and he told me that we're going through a 6th extinction now. There's been 5 mass extinctions in the history of the planet. The last big one wiped out most of the big dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. They're part of the same family. So, there's 9,000 species of birds, 4,500 species of mammals on the planet now. Dinosaurs are still here with us. We just call them birds. They're smaller than their counterparts. But he told me that we're going through a 6th mass extinction right now. That was my entry into this, and I was like shocked. And I'd been with Michael to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. And there's dinosaurs all around. You can see it almost like, they're laid out sometimes from the tip of the tail to the tip of the nose. Usually in the West here in America, you might find them eroded out. You only see part of the animal, but there you get, it's like incredible. It's like, it's been a desert for a really long time, and, it hasn't been a lot of, rainfall. So the animals don't get crushed by, faults and, having a mile of overburden above them. But when he told me that we're going through a 6th extinction, I thought, holy hell, what's the cause of it? And he said, there's 4 drivers to extinction, but the big one is habitat destruction for raising food for animals that we're going to eat. Yeah. And that was like, that should have been a wake up call, because this was in the 90s, but like, that just struck me, like, that we're basically eating our own way to extinction. And, that was, another one of those, a light bulb should have went off back then, back when I was working on that story, but it didn't like, I couldn't think of how to do it back then, because back then I was just a still photographer. But anyway, so the film is like, how do you not just create awareness about the sixth mass extinction to the general population, but how do you create change? How do you create the solutions? And, going back to this 10% number, we realized that, the film was picked up by Discovery, and Discovery, to their credit, seeing that the film, could be one of the most important documentaries that they've done, they did something unprecedented. They released it across almost all their channels, access to 2.5 billion people. And they, starting in, New Zealand, they released it as the sun came up around the world. So that when it finally came up in California, 24 hours later, I think what they say, 36 million people had seen the film in one day.
Yeah.
But still not that 10% number. And so to do that, we realized that I wanted to have at the base of the back end of the film, these projections where we could reach a lot of people. And what we did for that is we lit up the United Nations with these projection events. We did one on the United Nations, and this was in 2014. This is the day before the big climate march. It was like 600,000 activists in New York City. And now remember the United Nations. So we're putting endangered species on the United Nations. Never had been done before like that. And the United Nations in New York City, it's actually its own nation. It's actually technically not part of America. So Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, said, "Oh, we don't care what the police think." Well, if you want to have crowds there, then that's New York Police Department.
Yeah.
And the New York Police said, "Well, we don't want you to do this because it could be disruptive. We don't want to have 600,000 people storming the gates of the United Nations. If you have more than 500 people show up at the event, we'll shut it down on the streets of New York because we can control those." And so it looked beautiful, but not a lot of people saw it. And, so we premiered the film at Sundance. It did really well. We had it, licensed to Discovery, but I still wanted to light up the Empire State Building because I thought, well, the Empire State Building, then everybody's going to notice, and they can't. And I spent 4 years trying to get permission to put endangered species on the Empire State Building. I knew Tony Malkin, the guy that owned the building, the Empire State Building. He said, "Well, if you can get the city's permission, I'll let you do it." And because you can't just do it bandito, we needed like 50 IMAX projectors tiled together to make a single image. You needed like 1 million lumens, which is like an extraordinary amount of power to light up that big, that kind of real estate. Yeah. And so, I've been working since the Bloomberg administration to do this. Bloomberg was the mayor of New York at that time. And then it passed on to Bill de Blasio. Now, do you have time to talk to this? Because I can talk for a long time.
Absolutely. Okay. We are.
We do.
I find this story fascinating. So when we had won the Cove at Sundance, it was 2009. We couldn't get a distributor because 6 or 7 there was a big recession that was going on around the world, but it really hit the movie industry, and like 6 or 7 of the big distributors went out of business. Yeah. And so we'd won the audience award, at Sundance, but we couldn't we couldn't find distribution. Lynn Lear was on the board of Sundance. Her husband, Norman Lear, was the most successful TV producer in history. He had 5 of the top 10 programs on American television at one time. And she said, "Do you mind if we show the film at my house? There are a lot of Hollywood people that we can invite." I said, "Sure, let's do it." So we're there at this, screening, and it's like the who's who of Hollywood, and remember, Jeff Skoll turns to the COO of Lionsgate, and Jeff Skoll started this Participant Media. It's does the kind of films like I wanted to do, like they did Inconvenient Truth, Food Inc., a lot of great, films. And Jeff Skoll turns to, head of Participant, turns to Michael Burns, the COO of Lionsgate, and says, "I'll do the impact campaign if you distribute the film." And so right there in this living room, we had, this deal signed up. And so now fast forward 5 years later, I'm in the same living room again. And now the people, like their living room is kind of like Camp David, for the liberals,
Yeah.
And so Ban Ki-moon has like the three people working under Ban Ki-moon to promote COP21 in Paris are there in the living room, and they have the 50 heads of the top environmental organizations, the NGOs in the U.S. there. So the head of Sierra Club, Greenpeace, Oceana, and I'm there representing the Oceanic Preservation Society, and I'm the executive director. And Lynn asked me to stand up and talk about Racing Extinction, this film about the Anthropocene. And I said, well, last time I was in this living room, we were trying to get this documentary, financed and, getting out to the world. But, with Racing Extinction, it's going to be a great film. It's going to hopefully have some impact. But what we're really trying to do is light up the Empire State Building with endangered species to alert the world that we're facing an extinction crisis. Does anybody here know Bill de Blasio? And Norman Lear, her husband, standing in the corner of the room, and goes, I know Bill. This is no kidding. This is like on a Sunday. He flies to New York the next day. And then I think it was like on, the following day, I wake up and in my inbox, there's an email from Bill de Blasio saying, how do we make this happen? So I mean, now we have to come up with the money for it. Now we have to, break open the film and put it in there. And the distributor says, it's already good enough. The producers of my film said it's going to be too expensive. It'll be a non-event because the time that we had allotted to do it was August. Like it was August 3rd. And August is the time when everybody goes on vacation. And so they said, the producer said, it's going to be a non-event. All the important people are going to be in the Hamptons, which is a big vacation area in New York, or they'll be over in Europe vacationing. Because it gets late in the summer, or it gets dark later in the summer. The media won't be able to show up for, to cover it. So it'll be a non-event, you'll spend all that money for nothing. And I'm bullheaded. We raised the money, we did it. And I remember we'd rented out at a bar overlooking the Empire State Building. And it was really an incredible event, like we had the music up there at the bar, and it was really, it really got your heartstrings going. And my son had flown into a teenager at that point, probably. And he says, Dad, there's people on the streets. In my mind, I thought, well, people on the streets like waited to get into the bar because we had rented out the bar and they couldn't. He said, no, they're down this. Look over the edge of the building. We looked over the edge of the building, and it was like Fifth Avenue, which was right out along the side of the Empire State Building. It looked like the Easter parade. There was like thousands of people on the streets, and there was like a cab driver. I remember we went down in a brief intermission. Travis Threlkel and Chris Lejeune, the guys that actually technically pull these projections off for us, we went down on the streets, and there was like kids sitting on cars, people mobbed at the street corners, and there was and the Fifth Avenue goes from north to south, and so we were projecting on the south side of the building. So taxi drivers or pedestrians just looking at these mobs of people looking up. And they can't see what's going on. So this cab driver stops at a red light, and he's got a fare there. He's got people in the back, and he's looking at what's going on. He gets mesmerized. So he's in the middle of the intersection, stopped with New York, and the New Yorkers don't stop, right? They're honking, and this cab driver turns around and goes, points.
Oh, fantastic.
Anyway, it was a miraculous scene, and I think we had, there's people on the rooftops, there's people on the streets, and there was with really no advertising at all. We had one article in the New York Times that came out on the front page, but we weren't allowed to even publicize it. The police wouldn't allow us to publicize it. And so we had, I think, 939 million media views by Thursday. This top trending story on Facebook and Twitter for 4 days worldwide. And we thought, okay, now we're at that 10% number, right? We're a little bit over that, or the 10% number of like people that are, well, media views are different than views, so you can, like, one person can see it 10 times, but we thought, well, we're getting close. We have to be getting close to that number where people are now aware of the Anthropocene. And then we thought we couldn't get any more attention than that. And then the Pope called. The Pope wanted to project endangered species on the Vatican during COP21 to remember Pope Francis. Love the guy. I mean, I don't know him. I haven't met him, but we went to to Rome. Pope Francis is named after Saint. They named that's not his real name. He's named after Pope Francis of Saint Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of animals, right?
Yeah.
So he wants us to remind, he wants to do these projections to remind world leaders why they're at COP. Why world leaders are deciding, basically the fate of the planet. That there's more at stake than just humans. We're losing the natural world. So we go there to talk to the Pope's number 2, and he's there, very quiet. We're told, don't look at him in the eyes, don't speak unless you're spoken to. And the Pope's number 2 says, well, if it was up to me, we wouldn't do it. The last artist to do anything on the facade of the Vatican was Michelangelo. But the Pope wants this to happen, so we'll make it happen. And it still feels like a dream now, because something like that had never been done before. And I think we had 225,000 people watching it live. There's 600 media there. We had 4.4 billion media impressions just in the English language, and a lot of people, that those projections inspired laws that prevent some of the most endangered species from being trafficked. A lot of leaders of the youth movement cite that film as their inspiration to to do what they're doing now. So I and this is sort of gets back to that feeling. What gives you joy is like when you realize that you're helping other people, you're helping other species. That's like the best thing you can do to be human. That's what makes this satisfying, is that like yourselves, that you're helping change lives. And every person that, like, every meat eater, like in the United States, the average meat eater eats like 10,000 animals in their lifetime. And you think of all the downstream byproducts of that, the pesticides and the fertilizers for the crops that they're going to eat. That's the fresh water that you're going to save, and you're making people healthier. So, or you're allowing people to be healthier. We're not making people do anything, but these revolutions happen pretty quickly, hopefully. And I want to talk about this just a little bit, is that back when we were doing Racing Extinction, I had one of the first electric cars in Colorado. There's only 3 of them that I knew of back then. I had a 2002 fully electric Toyota RAV. Because back then California had a mandate that 2%, I think 2% of their cars had to be zero emissions. So back in the early 2000s, all the big companies made this big rush, and then the next president said, "Oh, forget that." And then so they had these. There's only like 1,500 cars in America. I bought one of them, and I was powering it with 120 solar panels, and I felt like I had discovered like the Holy Grail. Like when I was running ops out of Colorado, my monthly electric bill was about $1,000 between, because I had 12 people working there. I had computers and servers and all the things you need to run a business. And I went from $1,000 a month bill to depending on the month, between a $200 and $600 a month paycheck. I go to the mailbox, and I would, instead of having a bill, they would tell me how much overproduction I did, and I was getting a refund from it. So I was basically my own. I had 3 electric cars at that point. I had running my business, and I was generating all my electricity for free. It was like, and my neighbors were looking at me like I was nuts. It's like, no, this is amazing. Drive the car. It has an incredible pickup. It was nickel cadmium batteries. It wasn't, Tesla wasn't, was just really starting back then. And then for Racing Extinction, we wanted to make the film sexy. And, the Racing Extinction is really a result of watching, too many James Bond movies and Jacques Cousteau specials. So we built a Bond car for Racing Extinction. And it was the first car in the world to have an electroluminescent paint job. You could change the color
was fantastic.
With a flick of a button. We had a forward-looking infrared camera that came out of the frunk, where you normally have an engine and an internal combustion engine car. We had this camera that could see carbon dioxide or methane in real time. Then out of the back end, we had a 20,000 lumen projector, so we could, came out of on a robotic arm on a gimbal, and we could project those images on mountains or in skyscrapers and, disappearing license plates. And when we went to go buy the car, we met Elon down at Tesla, and we were gonna interview him. And I remember this was in October, And he wrote back and said, well, can we postpone the interview until December? And I said, sure, but why? He said, well, I could go bankrupt. And, obviously, he's done pretty well in the last 10 years. Now he's one of the, alternating between the number one or number three richest guy in the world. And I want to remind people that these revolutions, they usually take about 10 years. Like when people say, oh, well, it's going to be really hard to convert people to a plant-based diet. Well, 13 years ago, we were punching the number 2 key 6 times on our flip phones to text a capital C.
Yeah.
10 years ago, Elon thought he was going to go bankrupt. If it can be really depressing when you do this frontline work. That when you're really trying to change the planet, it looks Pollyanna. It looks like insanity. Your friends that don't understand what you're doing, think a lot of them think I'm a lunatic. But if you look at the long view of these movements, they all start out like that. Elon, some people might still say he's a lunatic, but I think he's a visionary. If you ever remember the woman that was driving that getaway car for us that we made for Racing Extinction, Lonnie Miller, she's a race car driver. She's a vegan race car driver. And we drove the car off the lot after we saw Elon. We bought we had to get the car ordered, but when we went to go pick it up, she had never driven one before. And she turned to me and she said, every other car on the road just became a relic. Mm-hmm. And it takes so long for culture. You think if you just give people the information, that should be enough, but it takes a while. We're kind of lemmings, as humanity. We do things that are detrimental to us for a really long time until we learn. In 1964 in America, the Surgeon General came out with a report that said smoking is hazardous to your health. In the 1990s, we were still smoking on planes.
Yeah,
we're crazy. We're nuts. And one thing that motivates me is just to know that we're crazy. And I might be crazy too, but but the world's really nuts, compared to, where we're trying to take it. I think in another 10 years, getting meat at a market is going to be like getting cigarettes, or smoking cigarettes at a restaurant. You could do that, but you have to do it outside. You have to, do it around the corner. People are starting to learn, but it's in Australia, Netflix, when we did this film called The Game Changers about the vegan athletes, Netflix doesn't give you the data on like who's seeing it. But we found out from somebody inside the company that Australia was the country that had taken, that was viewing it the most. Yeah. And
it was a big hit here. Yeah, it was definitely a big hit.
To me, I couldn't quite understand why it resonated so much. But I'll tell you what happened. This is in February of, I guess it was, I can't remember the year, because it would have been last year. Well, a friend of mine, Kyle Voigt, who's started an electric car company for General Motors. It's called Cruise. It's a completely self-driving. They're doing it so that you don't even need a driver. Brilliant kid. And he had this bug. He wanted to do something in his lifetime where he could be have a world record. And so he wanted to be the fastest person to ever run a marathon on every continent. Yeah. And so he built this program to figure out which airports he could fly into and do it the fastest route. And he trained for it for a couple of years. And I said, "Oh, I'd love to come along with you and document it just for the nuts of it." And he said, "Sure." So, we land in Antarctica. He gets off the plane. We land on the ice. He runs a marathon, gets off. We go fly to Tierra del Fuego. And we go to Panama, then to Cairo, then to Oman. I can't remember what the route was, but we were the fastest people to ever go around the planet. 2.98 days it took to on all 7 planets. He did a little bit longer because he had to run a marathon on the last every time he did it. I was exhausted just watching him because I'm photographing it. But we land in Perth, Australia. And he went on to go vacation with his family, and I wanted to stop in Australia to figure out what's going on with Game Changers in Australia. And I can't remember the hotel I was staying at, but I remember I was, like I asked the bellhop, I said, well, is there a good restaurant around here? He says, oh, there's a good vegan one right down the road. I said, vegan? I said, why do you say that? He says, well, do you see the Game Changers? I said, I'm the director. And it was like everywhere I went, people were talking about the Game Changers. There's a friend of mine that works for the Mindaru Foundation, David Ohana, who used to work for the UN when we were doing projections. And he said, I went out to dinner with him. He says, I'm not vegan yet, but I'm going to have to see your film, because if I have a dinner party at my house and it's not vegan, nobody's going to come. And so I don't know what happened in Australia, but you guys definitely drank the Kool-Aid.
We saw a very big change very quickly. And it was, I mean, we had one of our friends, good friends of ours, absolutely stoic. You've got to have meat. If you don't have meat, you're not a proper man. If you don't have meat, you can't build muscle. All the cliches that were predicted on the Game Changers film. Then he watches the Game Changers, and we didn't see him for a little while. And then he came back probably about a month later, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm all vegan. I'm doing all this training." And I'm thinking, we have been telling you this for quite some time. But it has made a very big effect. And
very good.
All credit to you and the team.
And especially on men. I think men are more reluctant to change to a plant-based diet because of the whole. It's a very masculine to eat meat. You need meat to be strong and so on. So that definitely has changed since the documentary.
And that was a very good part of the documentary as well, where that was dispelled so well.
Oh yeah, the erection test.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. That was like I can't, I probably I don't know how many hundreds of times I've seen that scene. I mean, because when you're making a movie, you see it all the way through.
Yeah,
several dozen times, but I've probably seen that clip hundreds of times, and I always got a smile on my face when I read it, because it's just watching people react to the difference of measuring their nocturnal erections on a meat-based diet as opposed to a plant-based diet, and seeing sometimes you're focused on one kid and other ones you're looking at the others. It's just like a perfect, almost
so
a sitcom, because it's so profound of what's going on. People can't believe it. But listen, if you see the blood that's drawn after one meal of meat, then you know that. Well, here's this. Erectile dysfunction is really a precursor to heart disease, because your arteries start to clog up, and one of the smallest arteries in your body goes to a man's body goes to your penis, and so erectile dysfunction is really a byproduct of what's probably going to become some form of heart disease.
Yeah.
So it only makes sense that you want to keep your tubes clean as much as possible. So. That's really, I think that's really the mic drop moment in the film. We didn't have to show anything but that one scene.
It was so good.
It's funny when you watch the film with a group of people, you can see like the wives
I don't know. I think Anka might be annoyed with me because we ended up with 3 kids.
Yes, we have 3 boys. All full of energy as well, being vegan. So it's
all vegan, yeah.
You might be describing a scenario where you're advertising for meat.
Certain days.
Yes, I think talking about our kids, we actually took him to the premiere here of the Game Changers.
We only had Luca then, so.
Yes, and we were obviously vegan at that time, and he was told by the kids at school, obviously coming from their parents, that vegans are weak, that you can't grow on a plant-based diet, strong and smart and so on. And obviously the documentary is completely the opposite. It's the perfect example of healthy, strong people. And he actually said, he's only 11, he actually described it as life-changing for him, because he could go at school and go, did you hear about this guy? And did you hear about this guy? They're all strong. They're all,
he was quite
athletes
happy
and so on.
Lewis Hamilton is a multiple world champion. he's vegan. Are you saying it's that?
Yeah.
So,
Dojevec, is it Dojevec? Just won the U.S. Open. I might be. I don't follow my sports heroes, but I think the tennis player who's vegan just won.
Yeah, Djokovic. Yeah, absolutely.
Djokovic. Yeah.
Yeah.
What other good stories have you received from the game changers? Did you hear of anybody completely changing, apart from going vegan, helping someone's life around?
All the time. I mean, I don't want to say it's daily, but you hear anecdotally all the time, of children's sports teams, sports heroes, changing, and I think it's part of that hockey stick curve. If once we reach the 10%, 10% it becomes unstoppable. At 30%, then people, because they're looking around at other people, see what they're doing, they start to adopt and take off. I was just reading an article this morning in the paper, and I keep on coming back to electric cars because I'm a big proponent of electric cars. It's way cleaner than internal combustion engines, certainly better for almost and the ride experience more joyous. The cars are intelligent. Certainly if you're powering them up with solar panels or some alternative energy, it's a lot cleaner. But wow, I forgot what I was going to say about. I got distracted.
Good stories from the documentary.
Yeah, let's keep on going. I'll come back to it.
So, as we were talking very briefly about cars, we are ourselves looking to try and purchase our first electric car. Australia is at the moment very difficult to get electric cars.
The article I saw this morning said electric cars will take over ICE vehicles, internal combustion vehicles, by 2035, like 5 years sooner. They said that by 2035, shortly after that, internal combustion engines will only represent 1% of the market. 1% of the market. Now it's like, it's not, I don't know what percentage electric cars are now, but like, believe me, back in, when I got my first electric car, we weren't thinking that, we knew that it would happen. We didn't think it would happen maybe that quick, but certainly all the other car companies are motivated to do that. But that was my point that I remember.
Absolutely. Well, they're all jumping on board so quickly now. Volvo just released a statement maybe about a month or so ago saying, is it that by 2025, or was it 2030, they will not produce any combustion engines whatsoever. And lots of the other manufacturers are jumping on board with that kind of action plan.
Yeah, they're just better. I mean, it's, here's the thing. You have to make them, as soon as you have pay parity, then, that's one of the tipping points. The food companies don't care what they're serving you. They don't care if it's healthy or not. They just want to know that maybe it's a little bit cheaper and maybe tastes a little bit better. Yep. So that's really their criteria for change. And then once that happens, it's happened with cars. I mean, I was driving a car and I had to get the oil changed on it, and I was like, oil change? How barbaric! I mean, it's like, it's such a drag. You're sitting there waiting for oil. Oil, really? Like, if you drive an electric car, it's like, the maintenance cost is way less. Even if it does cost a little bit more at the beginning, it costs way less over the course of, your time, the money for maintenance. You have like 18 moving parts in an electric vehicle, and you have thousands in an internal combustion engine. You have 20,000 explosions going on in that engine every minute, and it's dirty, it's filthy, it's, causing this blanket of pollution around the planet. And the other one's clean, it's joyous to drive, and they're fun. Yeah,
absolutely.
They are indeed. Going back to veganism and plant-based diet, my favorite subject, it is definitely a movement that we're all involved in, and it's big. I think for the last few years, things have turned around so quickly. We need to recognize this is big. And OPS have helped this movement grow so much, and you've definitely reached that 10%. How can we support OPS further so you can do more documentaries, so we can, there's a lot more people that join us?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're a small organization. There's only, I think, 3 of us on full-time salary, 2 of us on part-time, so 5 of us there working, and we hire out. Obviously, the movies need dozens or hundreds of people to work.
Yeah.
But we scale up as we need. But we're a small organization, but we do quite a bit. Was it Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, said, never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. I mean, I won't be shy. We need funding. I spent 90% of my time trying to get funds to do the projects that we do. We're doing the UN has asked us to do another projection event, this time on the east side of the building. This is facing the East River with Gantry State Park in Queens, so you can get hundreds of thousands of people. There won't be a problem like stopping traffic over there. It's a park. And I've been trying to raise money for that for the last year. And it looks like just yesterday, YouTube has come on board to do this. Now we have like 4 months to produce this event. And we're going to have, the mandate is this. The Secretary General wants us to activate 1 billion people to help solve climate change, equality, and severe poverty. I mean, so we're working with the Department of Global Communications with the United Nations. And so they'll, in preparation for this, for the last year, they've been putting us on these Zoom calls with global communications for who? The, World Health Organizations, UNESCO, UNICEF, the Organization of Astronauts. And they're all looking up to us to create this change that they're looking for. They says, we're 193 nations. They don't play well together. They're looking for us to try to change the world, because they don't do it, because they can't. It's hard for them to do it themselves because there's so much politics involved. And I tell you, it really feels daunting when you feel like when the people in the communications department of the one organization that is the symbol of people coming together to try to solve these existential threats are looking up to our organization to try to change the world, and then we're fighting for money to make it happen. I mean, I'm talking to billionaires, we're talking to family foundations, and it's almost unfathomable to me. And by the way, the projections event we did before, there were mainly shows that did have a profound effect on the people that saw them, either online or they're in person. But now we're going to be streaming people talking. Like when you're watching the building, you'll be able to hear it on your iPhone. So if it's Jane Goodall or Greta Thunberg or whoever, it's a 3-day projection event, and now the challenge is to get 1 billion people to help you solve these big existential threats that we're facing. Yeah. So now it's like we're communicating back and forth. We can, we have, instead of like 2 15-minute shows, we're doing 3 hours of content for 3 nights. Mm-hmm. And I can't think of anything that's more powerful than a film other than a projection event. Because a projection event, we can literally reach billions of people potentially in a very short amount of time. And we have 10 years to solve climate change. Otherwise, it's game over. Great Barrier Reef. I mean, it almost sounds like a joke, but it's like, now that's the good Barrier Reef. There's still a lot of nice parts of it for sure. Yeah. But we're losing this stuff. The idea. So we're struggling to get the last couple $1 million in, and we're fighting. It's like this is what I work with. It's like I'm trying to raise money to do this one projection event. We're trying to put like all of our focus into this, and people, they understand the threat, but they're really scared to donate some of their money for this cause. Mm. Yeah. And it's like your money's no good if we don't have an environment, and it's such a rounding error compared to, for a lot of these organizations and these people, compared to what the potential good could be. And listen,
even compared to what governments are subsidizing mass agriculture and fishing and so forth.
Fossil fuel.
Yeah, exactly. Fossil fuel subsidies.
We're trying to make this a solution-based thing. We'll have these, 10 or 15-minute increments where we'll talk about, here's what's going on with acidification, here's what's going on with, climate change, here's a solution. So all be solutions oriented. So it's not, you'll have, act one of a little section, you'll need to show what's going on. But the upside is that, there's tremendous opportunity for people that are seeing that, hey, look what's going on with electrifying the grids. Look at what's going on with food. A lot of my friends run, these big food companies, and they said after the Game Changers came out, they had to put on new factory lines The demand just accelerated so much. There's huge opportunity. Film is the most powerful weapon in the world for social change. And when we can adapt that to these big projection events like we're doing in the UN, that's going to be, in America, we have Super Bowls. This would be like, it'll be like a Super Bowl for the environment, but like 10 times more powerful, maybe 100 times more powerful. But, to me, it's unfathomable that we have to spend so much time convincing people that, it's the funding is the fuel for what we do. There's no shortage of great ideas. But, and it's not, by the way, it's just me doing it. Like when we do these projection events, we get some of the world's best photographers and cinematographers together. The people are doing, the documentaries, or, they're giving us their content. There's a great documentary in Australia called 2040. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
We're talking with them about, using some of their content. It's like the artists and the people that really understand what's going on get it, but the people have money in it. It's unfathomable to me that it takes so long to get the funding to do this frontline work, because the downstream effects for the children, for future generations, it's going to be profound. Because if you don't make the change now, I don't think you can reverse it so much later. I think it becomes harder, exponentially harder and harder. So we have 10 years to fix climate change before it becomes runaway. And, and listen, I think the planet's going that way. We're going to be plant-based. I think we're going to, if Elon goes and populates Mars, he's not going to be bringing farm animals. That's not the way you do it. But I think we're going that way anyway. We just need to accelerate it. And there's no better accelerator than having storytelling in these powerful venues. One thing we found is that when, you can project on any building really, but it's the edifice, the building that you project on. When you project endangered species on the Vatican, even if you're not religious, it speaks to creation. Or on the Empire State Building, folks, this is the one building that says this is the pinnacle of commerce and one of the best cities in the world. And then when you put a 60-story golden lion tamarin on that, it says this is important too. But when you do it on the United Nations, it's the one building that we have that shows the world coming together to solve these existential threats, and we're being challenged to do that. OPS is. So we're at OPS. opsociety.org. You can find me, Louie at opsociety.org, or Samara, if anybody ever wants to make a donation, we could, 100% of it goes into, I haven't been paid from OPS since 2018, so it's not like we're raising money for salaries. My staff gets paid, but I get paid from the films I do. But for this UN event, I haven't made I've been working for a year for this. I haven't get paid a penny. We have a.
We'll add all the information on our page as well, and we'll start posting on our social media, and hopefully we can help a little. This is such an important cause.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Really do.
Yeah. Well, we'll do whatever we can. Honestly, bigger people than we do, but we will certainly help as much as we can.
Yeah. Well, so you never know. Somebody who's listening to this could, it could ping for them. That's always the dream. It's like you're, a lot of times, I talk to, my girlfriend says, like, why are you, talking so much to these podcasts and these school groups? And it's like, you never, like what, back when that photographer was teaching that, that guest class when I was a photographer, changed my world, changed my life. Just like, maybe Racing Extinction changed yours, and the people that are now the leaders in the youth movement changed their life. And it's like, you never know. You can't look at it just like what's in it for me. It's like you're hopefully we're lighting up, people on this podcast. That's the dream. I'm not doing this for. I was on a call the other day with one of the advertising firms that we're working with for the UN event, and they were talking about, well, we haven't been paid from this so far, and they just started like a couple months ago. I said, well, I've been doing this for over a year, and I think if you keep your North Star, the dream that you're going to be changing the world, that you're going to be affecting, the world even slightly. That should be the motivation. It's not the awards. It's certainly not the money. There's a line from Mission Joy that's, this film that we just did with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, where the Dalai Lama says, people are always looking for external rewards for their joy, big car, big house, money, power, fame. And whenever you've achieved that, you can never have enough. And the only thing that gives you lasting happiness, like I said earlier, is when you're helping other people. And if you know that, then your decisions, and it's true, it's not just a religious thing. It's how we're wired. They do. This is really cool. I used to think that when people come out of one of our films, first of all, we designed the film so that's almost like a boot camp. We want people to be changed. Like most Hollywood producers say, it's about butts and seats, $10 in a box of popcorn. That's what you're aiming for, right? It's about the money. It's about and we think of it, people, as the audience's minds and seats, and our goal is not just to boxes of popcorn and money. It's like, how do you change their minds? And people come out of our films and they feel changed. Look at yourselves.
Absolutely.
And in the Dalai Lama film, the Dalai Lama has this organization called the Mind and Life Foundation. And he challenges scientists to find a scientific reason either to justify or to contradict the value of doing acts of kindness or compassion. And what the scientists have found is that it takes as little as 90 minutes to change a person's brain. That's what our films are, 90 minutes. And they find that you can actually, it's called neuroplasticity. And they've discovered this decades ago, but you actually, when you do acts of kindness and you're compassionate, it actually changes the way your brain is wired. Not just the way you think, it's the way it'll manipulate the serotonins and the dopamines that make you feel good. And people that do acts of kindness for themselves, they feel good while they're doing it. But when you do acts of kindness for other people, it's lasting. It lasts for weeks, and it changes the way your brain's wired. And when you do, then of course, you almost get more good out of it than the person that you're helping, right? Because it makes you feel good. And of course, then you're going to live longer. You're going to. They find out that they do blood tests with people after they do acts of kindness for others. They find out that their RNA changes. They become more resistant to diseases. There's a whole lot of reasons to be good, to be kind to other people and to other animals and to the environment, because it makes you feel good and it's better for other people. So it's win-win-win all the way across the board.
Absolutely. Well, it's the whole reason we started the podcast was to try and get the word out there, to try and be better, learn and do good in as many ways that we can help the climate as possible, really. And not just the climate, animals, everything. That's why the title is not so specific about one area.
Well, thanks for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
So we've taken a lot of your time. Sorry for that.
No,
we have just
on the contrary, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
We have just a couple of questions at the end with regards to what projects you're working on at the moment. You've mentioned a few things about a couple of the projects, and just wanted to get an update on all of the things that you're working on.
If you can, of course.
Yeah, it's true. Well, Mission Joy is just coming out. That's doing the film festival circuit. We were just in Tribeca last week, Tribeca Film Festival. We're in the Boulder Film Festival, a smaller one, but this is my hometown, my old hometown. Getting that film out there. We're doing the UN projection project. That's if we can pull that off, that's October 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of this year, the week before the next COP in Glasgow. Mm-hmm. We're doing a film called She Change, which is about 4 female big wave surfers that got pay parity in the sport of big wave surfing. It's really about a women's empowerment film. We're doing a film called The Last Place on Earth, because it's the last place on Earth where wild orangutans, tigers, elephants, and rhinos are in the wild together. Mm-hmm. We follow 4 activists that are getting back the land, this sort of Garden of Eden that's been abused for illegal palm oil plantations in Indonesia. Yep. We're doing a film. I'm not sure if my NDA allows me to talk too much about it, but it's on plastic pollution solutions. Yeah. That's really exciting because, to me, plastic is it's the smoking gun for the fossil fuel industry. People say, well, I need my internal combustion engines. How else are you going to power the lights on and stuff? But plastics, is like the secondhand smoke, because, plastic, especially for single-use plastics for food, it's now finding our way into our brains. And there's, plastics, they give genetically identical populations of mice obesogens. It's really the phthalates or the plasticizers that keep plastic soft or hard, right? You can dial that in by these plasticizers called phthalenes. They find out that if you could put phthalenes in a mouse, that given the same diet, same amount of exercise, they'll be 76% fatter, like really fat. These mice are like huge. And so it changes the genetics, these phthalates do. And not only does it change that generation that's eating them, it lasts for 4 generations. So you're making your, great, great, great grandchildren fatter too. So it has obesogens in it. They're finding a relationship, a high correlation between plastics in the brain and Alzheimer's disease, Lewy bodies, and ADHD. So, it used to be thought that, the average person in America eats about a credit card worth of plastic every week. And now people used to say, well, at least it's not, going into our brains, but now they didn't have the devices to measure it. Now they know that it is being, found in our brains. So, and the last 2 times I went sailing in the ocean, I never even jumped in the water because there was the physical plastic you could see. Plastic is supposed to outweigh, by the same rate that's going on right now, it's going to outweigh fish by 2050. There's so much plastic in the oceans right now, and the industry likes to tell you that, well, this is a littering problem or a disposal problem, but it's not. It's really plastics can be made out of anything organic. You can make it out of food scraps. You can make it out of hemp. You can make it out of just about anything. You don't have to use fossil fuel where you need these really, these plasticizers that are, now finding their way into our body, and they could make them that could biodegrade a lot easier than with fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And this is one of the big, drivers of their economic engines is plastic production. So to me, getting rid of fossil fuels, number one, as soon as possible. And listen, by the way, we're all hypocrites, right? We're all use fossil fuels. My laptop's made with plastics. The lighting's being, charged by probably a fossil fuel, plant somewhere out of Colorado by coal. But, certainly we can, in the Western world, we can do whatever we can to minimize our effects and keep on pushing from the politicians and the constituents. We need to work from both sides, the top down and bottom up to try to solve these issues. So we'll see what other projects are we working on. I mean, that's enough for now. And I'm not.
You seem pretty busy.
Yeah. But, I don't feel like, like I need to retire. You know what I mean? It's like I really get energized by this work. It feels it's very fulfilling to do it, but it is daunting. When you start to look at these the UN organizations, when they're looking up to us to help solve these issues, I do feel the burden of trying to actually create this change. And it's like, sometimes I do feel a little bit crazy, like, like the task before us is so daunting, but it is so beautiful that, and part of it comes back to my friend, Jim Clark. As I saw my best friend was changing the world every time he stepped out the door with his businesses, and he did it, from creating businesses from scratch. And it was really, looking at him and seeing that if he can do it, maybe I can do it. And with his help, it got me here. And in truth, he really did make me a billionaire in terms of how I thought I would feel if I had money. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's sort of an oxymoronic when you think of it. Like, like when I said, I'll teach you how to be a great photographer, you teach me how to be a billionaire. Because I always thought billionaire would bring me happiness. And I've known a lot of billionaires, working at Fortune and, doing this work. But I feel like I'm wealthy, but not in the way I thought I would be. Yeah,
emotionally wealthy. So what aspects would you say make you optimistic for the future?
Well, I mean, even hearing you both talked about how it changes your life. When I give talks to classes, and then like the classes write back, maybe forced by their teacher to say something nice. But, you start to see the change come. I was going to environmental conferences back in the early 2000s, and I would look around the room and think, man, look at these dreamers, thinking that electric cars and fossil fuels are gonna, back then it was like 1% of 1%, and then you start to see this, from your angle, that takeoff, that sort of that hockey stick curve start to happen. You read that internal combustion engines by a new survey is going to be less than 1% in the next 15 years of, it's just like, what, maybe it's okay to allow yourself to dream. Maybe it is okay to think that you can change the world, because I think, Steve Jobs said, it's the crazy ones that actually do change the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we ask this on every single interview, and it's mostly to just spread awareness of what we can all do. If you are to ask our audience to change one thing to save our planet, what would that be?
Well,
how can it be good?
I'd say if you want to change the world, change what's on your plate. You can do that 3 times a day and, change the world. Because every time let's say if you're a meat eater and you swap it out for plant-based, you're saving, another animal from a life of suffering. And it's all, think of all the, there's one more point I want to make. This to me is kind of profound. It's like, we never think about the externalities of what's on your plate, right? Or with, driving a car. But, the father of modern economics, Adam Smith, he wrote The Wealth of Nations back in 1776, the year that America really, started its Declaration of Independence. When supply and demand came from him. But when he did that, he couldn't think of, he couldn't imagine externalities, right? Yeah. Back then, the ocean was full of fish. He couldn't imagine that fossil fuels would cause this blanket of pollution that would come all over the planet. And, externalities, those are the fees that society must pay for the bad acts of businesses, was never figured into, the economic model. Yeah. So, I mean, now we know, can calculate the consequences of that. So every day that you decide to eat more plant-based, or eating your food closer to home, or, not, getting your produce that's wrapped in plastic, or making a stand at the grocery store and said, do we really need our bananas wrapped in plastic? That kind of thing, that all makes a difference. Every single act you do can have a profound difference in speaking up. So people said, how do you know you're eating with a vegan? And said, well, they'll tell you. It's because you're so passionate about this. It's not even like a lifestyle. It's like, if you see somebody smoking, if you see your friend getting drunk, repetitively, if you see bad actors, and you can say something or influence them, sometimes just by being healthy and making these choices, and not like announcing, people gravitate towards people that are happy, that are have more energy and are more vibrant. So that in itself is really a great message for any movement, is to see people getting excitement from what they're doing. And certainly when you eat well, excuse me, I have allergies here. When you're eating well and you feel like you have more energy, and and you're thriving, and people see that, people want that. So that in itself is really a great message for people.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, thank you both. And
I must say, I've really enjoyed listening to you, and the wonderful stories that go along with the wonderful things that you've done with the movies as well. It's really great. And
we'll see if anybody gets to the end of this podcast. Yeah. Send them a message if you watch the whole thing. I want to see what percentage of the people actually watch this.
I reckon we will. It was very good and it's very entertaining. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. Thank you, Anka. Appreciate it.
So a big thank you to Louie Psihoyos for being on the show, and also for us taking so much of his time that we had to split it into 2 episodes. But I found it fascinating. His life has been fascinating. I think I'm possibly slightly jealous of what he does. Not that I could do it myself, to be quite honest.
Indeed, yes. We have a lot to learn from him. And if you haven't seen the documentaries, please do. They are amazing. There's a lot of information in there. There's also a lot of scientific information, all based on studies and so on, that you can learn from. And it's great that we touched a little bit on the game changers.
Yeah.
I think this documentary has changed the world.
It certainly changed our life. And like we said during the interview, our 11-year-old son felt so much more confident and included after that as well.
Yes.
After being teased and stuff like that. And
exactly.
But I found the whole thing exceptionally good, and I thought James Wilkes's journey through that documentary was fascinating and extremely interesting, how he was learning from it as well, and also his recovery from having a plant-based diet aid his recovery.
Indeed, and it was great to see people like Lewis Hamilton and Morgan Mitchell, like high level athletes. Patrick Boomian, is it? Patrick?
The weightlifter.
The weightlifter, yes.
Wow. When he lifted all that on the show, I'm just thinking of the movie now. Ridiculous strength. But there we go.
Yes, it's great to see that you can reach that level of strength and obviously high elite bodybuilding and athletes and so on a plant-based diet. We knew about it.
Well,
we are all strong, but
if only we're all athletes.
But also really interesting to see a fellow Australian, Damien Mander, and International Anti-Poaching Foundation, a whole plant-based diet charity protecting our wild in Africa.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to see if you haven't seen this documentary. We thank Louie again for describing all of these documentaries that he's worked on, and also the new projects that he's working on. If you can, please support him. He's working on a new projection on the Empire State Building, showing the endangered species and the extinct species, in order to change people's perspective on life and to give us a better perspective on our future.
And as he said, we've only got 10 years. We've got 10 years to make this change before it's too late, which is a worrying thought. And it frustrates me that it's not in the media. It frustrates me that we haven't got almost like an evening news update of how we're making our lives better and our future more secure, but it's not. It's just, unfortunately, a lot of it is brushed under the carpet. But
it is indeed. So if we want to bring it up to the headlines, we need those projections back on the largest buildings on the planet, and hopefully the Empire State Building will only be the first one out of many again to remind people and companies and governments in general that we need to move on. We don't have much time left. So we will put his details on our website and on the show notes. Please donate. This is really important.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you enjoyed the show. We thought it was fantastic speaking to him. And in the meantime, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.